one thing I had during my ongoing convalescence is having a book read to me called The Divine Love Trip by Samapriya Dasi, Mataji, a god sister of mine who I don't know personally, but I feel like I know her now because it's a very, very personal book. Her own heart's feelings for Srila Prabhupada and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna. And after going through that, I feel very fortunate to have such a sincere, dedicated, advanced god sister, even though I don't know her. And there must be so many great devotees who we don't know of very well. Her husband, who I do know somewhat, is also one of those great devotees who's fully dedicated his life in Srila Prabhupada's mission, Dhruv Maharaj Prabhu. Anyway, one of the things she describes in that book is that she spent 15 years doing book distribution. That was her main service, her day after day after day after day. In Los Angeles, and the struggles she went through, and some of the anecdotes that there's some of the amazing things that happened. One thing she described was that by doing book distribution, meeting people every day, so many people from all different kinds of backgrounds, that being inspired by the Paramatma, she and other book distributors have this experience. She could tell people where they were from. Oh, you're from such and such a country, and even their occupation, and then naturally they'd be astonished. How could you know? And it's very helpful to sell the book. I had this experience one summer distributing books on Oxford Street with Adhikata Prabhu, who's another great lesser-known devotee. He's been distributing Srila Prabhupada's all his books all his life. He's shelter and guide for so many junior devotees. So we were distributing books on Oxford Street in London and other places during one summer. But especially on Oxford Street, it's like Los Angeles Airport in LAX, in as much as you meet people from all over the world. And we had this experience that you meet people and say, oh, you're from such and such a country. How did you know? And you're a teacher, aren't you? Oh, how did you know? So that's Paramatma's miracles acting within the heart. We don't know how it happens. Probably the mundane psychiatrists would come up with some explanation, not very good explanation, to try and explain how it's got nothing to do with anything mystical. But we simply accept it as Krishna's miracle. Another miraculous anecdote Samapriya Mataji narrated in that book. Just to give a little background, first of all, she writes that she had a specialty of hers was distributing two books together, Bhagavad Gita as it is, and The Science of Self-Realization. Very good choice. These, I also fully agree, for all it's worth, that these two books are the best books to give to newcomers, beginners, people who don't know about Krishna consciousness. And these two books in particular, they make devotees. People become devotees by reading them. Anyway, she used to distribute these two books, especially together. She'd try and give people two books at a time. Now, another specialty of hers was distributing books to Asian Buddhist monks. That would mean mostly from where? Korea, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, Tibet. Tibetan monks who actually they live mostly nowadays in Nepal and India. So anyway, that was her specialty, and if any of her fellow distributors saw a group of Asian monks coming by, they'd call her because she was expert in selling books to them, even though most of them didn't know any English. But that's another Paramatma-inspired miracle, that devotees are able to distribute books even to people who don't understand the language. You're somehow or other you're able to communicate. So the story, as she told it, is that one time she met a party of Korean monks, and she sold them these two books. They didn't understand English, but she sold them these two books. Sometime later, another of her services daily was to dress Sri Sri Rukmini Dwarkadish. What a glorious life. Dress the deities and then go out all day on book distribution, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. So one time, while she was dressing the deities, she heard the class, because the class was often given early, before the deity greeting, to facilitate the book distributors. So she heard a class given by a sannyasi in which he told a story. He told a story of how one young man from America became interested in Buddhism, and he thought he has to go and check it out, the real thing. So he went to Korea, and on landing in Korea, I guess he landed in Seoul, as he was going into the city, he met some Buddhist monks, and they couldn't speak English much, but they communicated enough with him to understand that he was interested in Buddhism, he'd like to experience it, the authentic, traditional Buddhism. So they said, well, you can come to our monastery. So they took another train or something. They traveled by train for several hours. Then after that, they went on a bus by several hours. Then they went on some really truck. They went by truck on some really backwoods country roads for some hours. And then they walked through mountain trails and eventually came to, and you can imagine, an extremely remote Buddhist monastery in a mountainous area. So he went there and he stayed there, and he liked it there, but he couldn't communicate much with the monks. But anyway, he integrated himself as much as he could, and he was very impressed by the huge library that they had. Unfortunately, the books were mostly in Korean and maybe some other languages that he couldn't understand or read, but he did find two books in English. And one was Bhagavad Gita as it is, and the other was The Science of Self-Realization. And when Mataji heard this, she thought, oh, maybe those were the books that I distributed, because that's what I do especially. So anyway, he read these books, this young man from America read these books and decided, wow, this is it. This is what I've got to do. I've got to be a devotee of Krishna. So he bade farewell to the Korean monks and flew from Seoul to Houston, went directly from the airport in Houston to the Krishna temple, ISKCON temple, and joined there. That was how he came to Krishna consciousness. It's a miracle. Krishna is coordinating. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hrideshe arjuna tishtati brahmayan sarva bhutani yantrarudhani mayaya. Krishna coordinates the movements of all living beings, and he coordinates how these books go out and how they reach people the first book of Srila Prabhupada's that I took interest in, read, was in someone's house in a country in Ireland, and they weren't interested in the book, so I asked her, can I read it? And she said, yeah, and I read it, and I went to England and joined the temple there. Now, miracle. Srila Prabhupada, he often denied that there's any such thing as miracle. He would say that, well, a miracle just means we don't understand how it's going on. Something's going on we don't understand. Just like he gave the idea that a child sees a plane flying in the sky and doesn't understand there's a human pilot within it. He thinks, oh, it's a miracle how the big metal machine is flying in the sky. That's an example. But actually, from our perspective as ignorant, foolish, conditioned souls, or even from the perspective of realized souls, the very fact that Krishna comes to this world and sends his great devotees like Srila Prabhupada among us to uplift us, it's a miracle because he's so great. He's fully self-sufficient within himself. He doesn't need us. We have rebelled against him. We don't want to serve him. But he comes anyway to try to uplift him. That's a miracle, how he's so compassionate, how he wants to extend his love to us, even though we're not interested in loving him. So the very fact that Krishna sent Srila Prabhupada among us is a miracle. As has often been commented on, and if we think about it, it's amazing. Srila Prabhupada's whole story of how he came to the Western world with nothing, some non-exchangeable rupees, no friends, no background, with the culture there, the first time he'd ever been outside or overseas. He had in poor health, at the fag end of his life as he described it. It was all the ingredients for failure were there, except, as he said, this miracle of him spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. He said, if there's any miracle, it's that I had firm faith in the order of my spiritual master. On another occasion he said that the miracle is that I'm presenting Bhagavad Gita as it is without any compromise. So that was miraculous, how Srila Prabhupada was able to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. And everyone he brought to Krishna consciousness, especially in the Western countries, was a miracle. It can be expected that people in India can take to Krishna consciousness because that's the ancient culture which many in India follow. But in the Western countries, there was no idea of it, and people were so fallen. Yeshang tantagatang papam jananang punya karmanam tidvanva mohanirmukta bhajante mandiravrata. Ha! One who is free from sinful reactions, who has become cleansed of that, who has performed pious activities, and who is free from the duality of delusion. Such a person can engage, Krishna says, in my devotional service with great determination. So the Western people were totally disqualified right from that one verse of Bhagavad Gita. But Srila Prabhupada, he made our qualification. He showered his mercy on us, and how he was able to bring any one person, even one person, to pure devotional service is a miracle. What to speak of so many all over the world. And Srila Prabhupada enacted so many miracles, getting 17 books published in 2 months. Impossible! Impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. Srila Prabhupada quoted. And he had it done. So many things. Devotees, they were distributing 500 Back to Godhead magazines, mimeographed. Prabhupada ordered 20,000 a month to distribute them. And they did it. So many miracles Srila Prabhupada enacted by spreading this Krishna consciousness. The main miracle was himself, and then bringing Krishna consciousness all over the world, bring so many people to Krishna consciousness. And there were so many sub-miracles within the main plot. Every book distributed, especially in the Western countries, is a miracle. How is it possible that people who are dedicated to illicit sex, meat eating, gambling, intoxication, they're going to take books which tell them, give all these things up and surrender to Krishna in the land of liberty where people don't want to surrender, they want to be free. Srila Prabhupada himself said that. I thought when I came to America and I asked them, now you give up meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication and gambling, they'll say, Swamiji, you please go back to your own country. Every book distributed is a miracle, and these miracles continue today, especially those who are doing book distribution. They can see the miracle of how Krishna is inducing people to take these books. Of course, the strong desire of the devotee, that also Krishna reciprocates with that. But it's a miracle how people, how they're long way away from Krishna. And Krishna intervenes in their life via the medium of the book distributor. Krishna appears in their life. Otherwise, their whole life is black. There's this campaign, Black Lives Matter. Everyone's life is black. Black with suffering. And Krishna cares for everyone. So Krishna, he appears in the form of his books and appears in the hands of people who don't want them, who have no interest in them. But Krishna inspires them to take them. And then people become devotees, as Srila Prabhupada said famously in Los Angeles. Print as many books in as many languages and distribute throughout the whole world, and the Krishna conscious movement will automatically increase. So these miracles, they continue. Every book distributed, so many miracles. Devotees who are really trying to spread Krishna consciousness, struggling to spread Krishna consciousness, they see miracles happening all the time. What is this miracle? It's a manifestation of Krishna's achintya shakti within this world. We just can't explain it, but we can explain it by saying this is Krishna's inconceivable energy at work, his inconceivable mercy. So devotees who are preaching Krishna consciousness with, especially just like those book distributors who go out day after day after day, year after year after year, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books with no personal motive. They simply want to give you can't do it unless you're free from personal motive. You can't go on year after year after year distributing these books. So these devotees, they see all the time miracles happening as they pass out these books. It shows us that Krishna is real. Krishna is alive. Krishna is active in our lives. He's involved to help our preaching. What is the proof that God exists? Come and join us, distribute these books, and you'll find out. And you'll find out by chanting Hare Krishna and applying yourself in devotional service how your life miraculously changes. Just one little miracle anecdote to finish this little talk. This is told by Shyamasundara Prabhu, who joined Srila Prabhupada's movement in 1967. And he believed in miracles. He saw Srila Prabhupada enact miracle after miracle, and he got the formula that if you just try to do something, shooting rhinos, try to hunt a rhino, shoot a rhino, impossible. Yeah, okay, let's give it a try. So one of the anecdotes he mentioned, give it a try and Krishna will help and impossible things will happen. So one of the anecdotes he mentioned was that one time the devotees were way behind on the rent payments for the storefront building, and it was the final day. They were several $100s in arrears. They had to pay that day, otherwise they'd be evicted. They had no idea what to do. They had no idea how to get that much money. And that early that morning, they went out for chanting japa or whatever, and they saw $100 bills just blowing along the sidewalk. So they collected them all, and it was just enough to pay all the arrears. They saw Krishna in $100 bills blowing in the breeze. All glories to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All glories to His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. All glories to the devotees who have dedicated their lives in this glorious mission of spreading Krishna consciousness throughout the world. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.